experts is important, and of course we honor the great, theologians and jurists of the classical period. But they're not alive today. And I can tell you, I bet if they were alive today, if Al-Ghazali, what did Al-Ghazali say in the book on marriage? Marriage is like enslavement. Al-Ghazali described marriage as the enslavement of a woman. And the jurists of the classical period had no qualms and no fears and no shyness to describe that, because that was the experience of the time. But this is the 21st century. Nobody can say marriage is enslavement. Wrong? No, he was right in the 12th century. But in the 21st century, the concept of marriage has to change. It has to be a partnership between equals, because that is the reality of our lives today. So please bear in mind, that what we're talking about is human understanding, human knowledge, human interpretation. And if we want to live in a democratic society, if we want Islam to remain a source of law and public policy within a democratic nation state, then it must be open to public discussion and public debate, and all kinds of views must be taken into consideration.
Thank you very much. And I don't want my head to be cut off after this. But anyways, thank you very much, audience, for your attention. And I believe we can have a very spicy topics going on after this. If you have any further questions, feel free to ask the speakers themselves throughout lunchtime. And I would like to give another warm round of applause to the speakers for today. I will now please give back the mic to them. Thank you.
Because there are also many women leaders. So that is the difference. So gender is socially constructed. It changes with time. It changes with place. It can change. It evolves. But sex is biological. It can't change. Yeah, you were born that way. So with that, the whole issue of gender and religion, of course, as a feminist, as a women's activist, I attend a lot of conferences all over the world on women's rights. Yeah, and this includes women's rights, not just in Islam, but everywhere. And what is, for me, what is very clear, that if you take up religion, that all the discrimination that the Buddhist women talk about, that the Hindu women talk about, that the Christian women talk about, that the Jewish women talk about, is the same as what the Muslim women talk about. That basically, it is patriarchy. Patriarchy is a world that's dominated and defined by men, and that's what we have inherited. Our religions were revealed within a patriarchal world where men were leaders, where men were the decision makers, where men interpreted the scriptures, where men led institutionalized religions, men led the churches, and because they dominated, they defined what the scripture means for women, and what it is to be a woman in Islam, or in Christianity, or in Judaism, or in Hinduism, or in Buddhism, and what it is, and how to behave as a woman. All these are defined by, within a patriarchal system, and it leads to discrimination against women. And I think that what makes a difference today in why gender and Islam becomes such a, there's so much more world attention, international attention on gender and Islam, is really because in many countries, in non-Muslim majority countries, many of the laws have to evolve and change to recognize equality between men and women, to end discrimination towards women. But the problem that we have in Muslim countries is that Islam is still a source of law and public policy, and that by itself is not a problem. The problem lies is who decides this is Islam. And in many Muslim societies, again, it is the patriarchs, the patriarchal leaders of religion and the patriarchal leaders of our society, whether at the community level or at the political level, that decide this is Islam. And in that decision process, it is the traditional view in Islam that says that men and women are not equal, that men are superior, and that attitude of, that belief in the superiority of men over women has led to laws. Yeah? So for example, the Islamic family law. The Islamic family law is still very discriminatory towards women. The Hudud law, which exists on the statute books in Kelantan and Terengganu, is discriminatory towards women because the Hudud law does not recognize the evidence of women at all. So you could be raped in a stadium of 100,000 women, but because there's not a single male witness, none of those 100,000 women could be witnesses to whose evidence can be accepted in the Sharia court under the Hudud law. So many of the laws still discriminate against women because it is defined, by men who don't believe that women and men are equality and use Islam, to sanctify that position. So I, as a Muslim, as a believer, I do not believe that Islam is unjust. I do not believe that God is unjust. And for me, if justice is the objective of Islam, if justice is the objective of Sharia law, then the challenge for us today, in Muslim countries in particular, in Muslim countries where religion is a source of law and public policy, as opposed to Turkey, where religion is not a source of law and public policy. In Muslim countries, most Muslim countries, religion is a source of law and public policy, where, that in today's world, the idea of equality is intrinsic to the conception of justice in the 21st century. This is a challenge that we face. How do we bring about equality in Islam, in our understanding of Islam, in Islamic laws, in a Muslim society where those who dominate the decision-making powers of that country, and many in society as well, do not believe in equality between men and women. So I think this is a challenge, and why, in countries, like I said, all religions discriminate against women, but because religion, because of secularism, or because, in many of these countries, it's much more difficult to use religion to justify the discrimination. But religion is used still, for example, in the US, the issue of abortion, the issue of stem cell research, so religion plays a very important role in society. So for me, the most important thing is really the importance of opening up that public space for discussion, for debate on these issues, to decide, whether do we want to move towards equality between men and women in our society of the future, what is this? Leadership of tomorrow begins today with people like you who will be leaders of tomorrow. Or do we want to remain in a society that discriminates against women? And I think what is peculiar, I still have 5 minutes, still not up, yeah? Okay. What is peculiar in Malaysia, and what is extremely frustrating for me as a Muslim, is that the government is open to the concept of equality and recognizes equality. The government has been amending laws that discriminate against women, but only for non-Muslims. And this is what, for me, is just so outrageous as a Muslim, that we Muslim women are supposed to, play dead, roll over and play dead, while the government, goes on amending laws, the Guardianship Act, the family law, absolute equality in the family law. In fact, there's one provision that actually discriminates against men in the civil family law, and men are beginning to talk about it and wanting reform. This is the issue of maintenance of children. But the family law, absolute equality, Guardianship Act, inheritance. So the trajectory of the government in terms of law reform is towards removing discrimination against women. Because the women's groups have been pressuring, have been lobbying, have been educating the decision makers on this issue of equality, and the government also signs international treaties. CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the Beijing Platform for Action, the Non-Aligned Movement Declaration on Rights of Women. So many of these international platforms that Malaysia plays a very active role, the government has signed to these platforms. So it amends all these laws to end discrimination against women, but only for non-Muslim women. So for Muslim women, you know, we have to like fight for it because